Welcome to Outrage Science Bites, where we break down complex topics in bite-sized episodes. I'm your host, David Beckmeyer, and today we're kicking off Week 3, Technology and Outrage, by exploring a pivotal moment in history, the birth of the Internet, and how the democratization of access has shaped the modern world. The Internet, hailed as the great equalizer, promised a future where information would be free and accessible to all. But like many revolutions, the story is more complicated. Today, we'll trace the impact of the Internet's rise from its utopian promises to the unintended consequences we're grappling with today. Along the way, you'll hear from experts who have studied how this technology has shaped and reshaped our world. Let's start with a critical perspective from the late C. Edwin Baker, an influential scholar in First Amendment and media law.
Baker died in 2009. In the last 10 years of his academic career, he was writing about the Internet. And his main point was, yeah, this technology is great. It's really cool. But all these people who are saying, oh, all of the concerns about legacy media and concentration, whatever, throw all those out the window because now, it doesn't matter. Anybody can just go on and say what they want. We've reached the sort of apex of democracy. This is so incredible. He was like, no, the underlying structure, right, that conditions everything that we're doing in that space are exactly the same as they were before. Which is when it comes to ownership, when it comes to who actually has control over this, over the public sphere, whether it be the legacy public sphere of print media and broadcast or the digital public sphere. The fact that control resides in these tiny number of very, very wealthy people and shareholders, right? That's what actually determines the effect that this phenomenon is going to have on democracy. In many ways, it wasn't a very complicated analysis. It was just like, guys, stop deceiving yourselves. It's like, look at what's really happening here right in front of us.
Baker's analysis reminds us that despite the Internet's appearance as an open space for public discourse, the power structures remain largely the same. Control over the major platforms and media outlets is still concentrated in the hands of a few powerful entities. The Internet, while democratizing access, hasn't necessarily democratized influence. This brings us to a crucial limitation of the Internet, atomization, the fragmentation of voices. In many ways, the Internet allows individuals to speak, but often it feels like they're shouting into the void. With so much information competing for attention, any one voice struggles to be heard. In many ways, Baker's warning foresaw what we now call the platform problem, the concentration of power within a handful of social media companies. It's a stark reminder that democratizing access to information doesn't necessarily mean democratizing power itself. Let's move back in time to another technological revolution, the invention of the telegraph, and hear how it reshaped communications in ways that parallel the Internet. Tobias Rose Stockwell explains how new technologies can amplify division and even fuel conflict.
Back in the day, it was like you said, the postal service was the fastest way we could actually spread information, to speed a horse. When the telegraph came along, we had huge upset. Right, suddenly there was tremendous misinformation being spread all over the country at the speed of the telegraph, and that was incredibly disruptive. And you can actually draw a line from the telegraph to the Civil War. Not saying that the Civil War wouldn't have happened without the telegraph. I think it still would have happened, certainly, but the outrages being shared increased dramatically during that time.
The telegraph was a revolutionary technology that changed the speed at which information could travel, much like the Internet would do over a century later. And just like with the telegraph, the Internet didn't just increase the speed of communication, it amplified the spread of misinformation, polarization, and division. New technology, whether it's the telegraph or the Internet, often carries the unintended consequences of accelerating conflict. It's a reminder that while technology may connect us faster, it doesn't always bring us closer. This brings us to another key limitation of the Internet in democratizing information. It lacks the infrastructure and institutional support necessary for meaningful public discourse. In a healthy democracy, we need pluralist communication systems, institutions that support diverse voices and foster substantive dialogue. But online, without these systems, we often see individuals posting opinions in isolation without real engagement. And let's not forget the digital divide. Not all communities have the resources to produce media or to participate effectively in online discourse. Access to high-speed internet, for example, varies greatly depending on socioeconomic status and geography. This inequality further limits who gets heard in the supposedly open space. Next, Tobias Rose Stockwell gives us a fascinating analogy for how the internet has profoundly transformed industries like encyclopedias and libraries, handing off their roles to platforms like Wikipedia and Google. But when it comes to journalism, the transition has been far less smooth.
If you look at the history of the internet, right, and different industries when they met the internet, when, we used to have this whole industry of people that spent their entire lives, entire careers going around trying to track down very specific facts to put them into very specific parts of a very specific book called encyclopedias that we would then sell to people. When that industry met the internet, we got Wikipedia, right? Which is, millions of times larger and actually in some ways better and more well-referenced than a traditional encyclopedia, right? Available to anyone for free, which is incredible, right? So that transition, that was like, you think about this as a relay race where different industries, they touch the internet and there's this handoff that happens. Encyclopedias did the handoff to the internet and we got Wikipedia, and Wikipedia kept running and it got better, right? Similarly, we had libraries. We still have libraries, but if you had a question about something back in the day, for hundreds of years, you would go to a library, and there was this very sophisticated method of going through and trying to, of a librarian managing all that information, putting in the Dewey Decimal System and trying to keep track of all the information in the books so that when you went to the library, you could find what you needed. You had a question about something, you get that answer in real time. When libraries met the internet, ostensibly, and this isn't a one-to-one comparison, but that relay race, when libraries passed off the internet, we got Google. And Google is this incredible resource that you can answer just about any question, again, incredibly fast. It's not, maybe quite as accurate, but it's still incredibly valuable for us, right? It's hugely, hugely valuable handoff and trade-off, right? Now, when news met the internet, however, like the industry of journalism, the industry of newspapers met the internet, we didn't get a handoff, right? We got NewYorkTimes.com, we got, Breitbart. Like, what did we get when that transition happened? And the reality is the transition was supposed to happen to social media, right? If you look at, when we look at social media seemed to kind of emerge whole hog. It was like, oh, this totally new invention. It's this magical new thing. Actually, what it was this transition from journalists and from newspapers to all of us, right? So journalists have this protocol, this design, this system of norms and rules for sourcing information, for sharing information, for fact checking, and for calling bullshit on one another. And that was a core part of the journalistic enterprise. And it took over 100 years for those standards to emerge, right? That handoff was supposed to happen to social media because basically we all became journalists. If you squint your eyes and look at a social media company, it is the exact same thing as a newspaper. The only difference is the serving instructions and the scale, right? So a social media company, if you look at a social media, it's like you have your feed, which is your front page of your news, right? You have the reporters, which are all of us that are reporting on something and post and giving our opinions or giving our analysis or giving our news reporting on stuff. But it was missing this core set of fundamental protocols that journalists and editors spent a very long time developing, right? So we missed the handoff, and we have this limping, terrible system as a result, which is social media.
This missed handoff to social media is a crucial point. Social media has essentially taken over the role of news media, but without the established standards, protocols, or ethics that traditional journalism developed over decades. Instead, we've seen a system emerge where engagement, often driven by outrage, trumps accuracy or thoughtful analysis. So, while the internet has democratized the creation and, with limitations, the dissemination of information, it has also undermined many of the structures that help foster a healthy, informed public sphere. And here's where we need to address the role of government and policy. Free speech protected by the First Amendment does not guarantee equal access to platforms or influence. To ensure a truly open and pluralistic public sphere, affirmative measures are needed, policies that address industrial concentration and promote diverse voices. Like other technology before it, such as telegraph, radio, and TV, the birth of the internet brought with it a wave of optimism, an idealistic vision of a more democratic and connected world. But as we've seen, the reality is more complex. Atomization, resource disparities, and the lack of infrastructure have all limited the internet's potential to truly democratize information. As we continue exploring technology and outrage this week, we'll dive deeper into how these digital systems impact our mental health, politics, and society. I'm David Beckmeyer, and this has been Outrage Science Bites. See you next time.